Chapter 1. The Quiet War No One Talks About. There is a war happening every day, and most people don't even realize they're in it. It doesn't have explosions. No sirens. No breaking news headlines. But it's there, silent, constant, invisible. And it's being fought in your mind, your schedule, your habits, your attention span. It's not a war for territory or resources. It's a war for your future. A war between the version of you that you could become and the one the world would prefer you stay. Comfortable. Distracted. Uninformed. This war doesn't use weapons. It uses information. Or more accurately, lack of it. In a time where we are drowning in data but starving for wisdom, where endless scrolling feels like motion but leads to nothing, the battlefield is your mind. And the greatest threat you face is not ignorance, it's comfort. Because comfort tells you, you already know enough. You've learned all you need. Take a break. You're ahead. But that voice lies. That voice wants you sedated. That voice is the silent assassin of greatness. Because the moment you stop learning is the moment you start dying. Intellectually, spiritually, creatively. And so you have a decision to make. Not once. Every day. Do you stay asleep, lulled by distraction and repetition? Or do you wake up and train your mind like a warrior trains his body? Because education is not school. Education is not credentials. Education is a discipline. A daily sharpening. A deliberate act of defiance against mental laziness. And those who practice it, truly practice it, rise above the noise. They start to see the world differently. They connect dots others can't. They predict moves before they're made. They become architects of their lives while the rest live inside walls they didn't even know were built around them. This is not a game. This is not about trivia or surface-level knowledge that sounds good in conversation. This is about depth. The kind of depth that gives you control over your time, your value, your influence. Because in this economy, the currency is not attention, it's understanding. And understanding can't be downloaded. It can't be faked. It must be earned. Think about the names we still talk about: Edison, Carnegie, Franklin, Lincoln. Men born into poverty, obscurity, disadvantage. Yet they became giants. Because they never stopped learning. Edison devoured scientific journals and conducted thousands of failed experiments. Franklin taught himself multiple languages, founded libraries, and read constantly into old age. Carnegie read books daily, built his network through knowledge, and credited his entire empire to one simple principle: self-education. It wasn't luck. It wasn't genius. It was discipline. And they lived in a time where access to information was a privilege. You're surrounded by it. You have the collective knowledge of human history in your pocket, and yet most people use it to consume content that depletes them, entertainment that sedates them, outrage that distracts them. You are being programmed every single day, and if you are not programming yourself deliberately, then someone else is. Understand this. In a world moving this fast, the only true power is speed of learning. What you knew last year is already outdated. What you ignore today becomes your weakness tomorrow. This is not paranoia, it's math. And the equation is simple. If you don't learn daily, you fall behind daily. The gap between those who invest in their minds and those who don't is no longer philosophical, it's economic. It's political. It's spiritual. Because the mind is the foundation of all leverage. Every innovation, every movement, every revolution begins in someone's mind. And those who feed their minds daily will own the future. But education alone is not enough. It has to be deliberate. Reading without reflection is just noise. Learning without applying is self-deception. It feels productive, but it changes nothing. You must not only consume, you must integrate. You must process, question, challenge, apply, and embody what you learn. You must be ruthless in filtering what deserves your attention and relentless in turning knowledge into advantage. Because that's the edge. The advantage of the top 1% isn't talent. It's not inheritance. It's how fast they learn and how ruthlessly they apply it. They don't wait to be told what's relevant, they seek it out. They don't consume casually, they consume with precision. They take notes. They extract insights. They act. Every book becomes a blueprint. Every podcast a puzzle. Every conversation an opportunity to evolve. While the rest entertain themselves to death, they build. So if you want to stay ahead of 99% of people, don't chase trends, chase truth. Don't follow crowds, follow curiosity. Read the books no one else is reading. Study the fields no one around you understands. Learn skills outside your lane. Learn history to understand patterns. Learn economics to understand incentives. Learn philosophy to understand yourself. Learn science to understand reality. And learn communication, because the person who can explain clearly can lead. Boys. And understand that educating yourself isn't just about career growth. It's about freedom. The more you know, the harder it is for others to control you. The more you understand, the harder it is to manipulate you. When you know how systems work, economic systems, political systems, social systems, you stop being a pawn and start becoming a player. You stop reacting to life and start designing it. You also start seeing the lies, the illusions, the distractions. You start noticing how people waste years defending beliefs they've never examined. How they argue without evidence. How they repeat phrases they heard once and never questioned. How their opinions are rented, not earned. You see it clearly, and you quietly choose a different path. You go from noise to nuance. From reaction to reflection. From follower to student. And that's what you must become, a student for life. Not for grades, not for applause, but for mastery. For evolution. For sovereignty. Educate yourself not to impress others, but to liberate yourself. Do it because your future deserves a sharper mind. Do it because your family deserves a better leader. Do it because the world you want to live in won't build itself. So start now. Read with intention. Ask harder questions. Take notes like your survival depends on it. Watch documentaries instead of empty shows. Analyze instead of scroll. Write down what you learn and teach it to others. Challenge your opinions, confront your biases, and seek knowledge that unsettles you. Because that's where growth lives, in the discomfort of truth you weren't ready for, but needed to hear. This is the quiet war. A war for your awareness, your capacity, your clarity. And in this war, you win not with volume, but with discipline. Not with noise, but with understanding. Not with distraction, but with daily, focused learning. Educate yourself like your future depends on it, because it does. This is not a motivational idea. This is the principle on which entire lives are either built or buried. And if you stay consistent, if you learn with hunger, think with depth, apply with courage, then in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, people will ask, "How did you do it?" And the answer won't be loud or glamorous. It will be simple but profound. I educated myself. Every day. While others waited. Chapter 2. Mindset is the foundation of all learning. Before you can truly educate yourself, before books matter, before strategies matter, before any of it can make a difference, you have to build the kind of mind that can receive knowledge. Not just hear it, not just skim it, but absorb it, process it, use it. That starts with mindset. Because mindset is not positive thinking. It's not a collection of motivational quotes or empty affirmations. Mindset is your internal operating system. It determines how you respond to failure, how you deal with complexity, how you manage discomfort. And if your mindset is not aligned with growth, you will reject every opportunity for progress the moment it becomes difficult. You'll read the book but not apply it. You'll take the course but never finish. You'll hear the truth but ignore it, because it contradicts the story you've been clinging to about who you are. Mindset is the lens through which you interpret everything. It decides whether you see effort as a burden or a privilege, whether you see criticism as an attack or a roadmap, whether you see challenges as signals to stop or signals to evolve. And here's what's dangerous. Most people walk around unaware that they even have a mindset. They believe their thoughts are facts, that their opinions are truth, that the voice in their head is objective. But it's not. That voice is a reflection of everything you've been taught, everything you've internalized, everything you've chosen to believe. And if you never question it, if you never challenge it, then your life will be dictated by limitations that were never yours to begin with. You can't build a powerful life on a weak mental foundation. If your mindset tells you that intelligence is fixed, that learning is boring, that your future is determined by your past, you've already lost before you've started. And it's not because you're incapable. It's because you've accepted a story that shrinks you. Look at history. Every major breakthrough started with a radical shift in mindset. Before Edison invented anything, he believed experimentation was valuable, that failure was not the end, that persistence mattered more than reputation. Before Carnegie became an industrial titan, he adopted the belief that the mind was the ultimate lever, and he read, studied, and reflected endlessly, despite coming from nothing. They succeeded not because they had access to more resources, but because they had a different frame through which they saw themselves and the world. And that frame, that mindset, must be rebuilt constantly. Not once. Not occasionally. Daily. Because the world is constantly trying to reinstall its version. The version that says, don't think too hard. Don't question. Don't go too far. Stay where it's safe. Stay where you're told. If you're not actively shaping your mindset, it's being shaped for you. Every time you consume lazy content, every time you surround yourself with people who settle, every time you repeat self-limiting language, you're reinforcing mental patterns that make real learning impossible. And without learning, there's no transformation. Just repetition. Just survival. Just slow decay dressed as routine. So how do you build a mindset for elite learning? First, you have to accept that your identity is malleable. You are not fixed. You are not stuck. Your intelligence, your habits, your emotional responses, your ability to grow, all of it can be changed. But not with wishful thinking. With work. And that work starts with what you tell yourself every day. The stories. The labels. The internal dialogue. You have to audit that constantly. You have to ask, is this thought moving me forward or keeping me small? Because your thoughts become your actions, and your actions become your results. Second, you have to embrace discomfort as a requirement for progress. There is no learning without friction. No growth without confusion. If you're only doing what you're already good at, you're not learning, you're just reinforcing. Growth comes when you stretch, when you fail, when you look foolish and keep going anyway. That's what separates lifelong learners from casual dabblers. The learners seek out resistance. They want the complexity. They run toward what they don't know, not away from it. They don't say, this is hard. They say, this is where I get better. Third, eliminate the myth of talent. Yes, some people have natural inclinations. But no one becomes elite without effort. No one becomes world-class without obsession. And the second you start believing that greatness is something people are born with instead of something they build, you give yourself permission to settle. You give yourself an excuse to stay average. But when you see learning as the only variable that matters, everything changes. You stop comparing. You stop envying. You realize you can close the gap. With time, with intention, with persistence. You don't need to catch up overnight. You just need to keep going when most people quit. Fourth, develop what the Stoics called inner citadel. That's the part of your mindset that remains unshaken by circumstances. The part of you that says, I don't care what today looks like, I will grow anyway. It's the part that holds the line when emotions try to hijack your discipline, when fear tries to reroute your direction. Because every day, you will be tempted to abandon your growth. You will be offered easier paths. You will be surrounded by people who stopped growing and want you to do the same. And if your mindset isn't strong, you'll join them. Not because you want to, but because you're too mentally weak to resist. And finally, you must treat your mindset like a muscle. It has to be trained. Federal recovered. Protected. That means reading challenging material. Listening to people who think deeper than you. Writing, reflecting, wrestling with ideas. That means deleting the distractions that dilute your thinking, saying no to environments that breed mediocrity, and constantly pushing the limits of your understanding. Because no matter how powerful the information is, if your mindset is fragile, it will collapse under the weight of challenge. But if your mindset is resilient, if it's agile, if it's deliberately crafted, then there is no limit to how far you can rise. You want to educate yourself every day and stay ahead of 99% of people? Start here. Start by rebuilding the mental system that runs everything else. Upgrade your mindset and everything else follows. Learn to think differently, and your life will look different. Not immediately, not easily, but inevitably. Because the mind is where all learning begins, and where all excuses end. Chapter 3, Belief, the hidden engine behind learning. Every action begins in the mind. Before you study, before you commit, before you change your habits or even consider chasing something greater, there is always a silent decision. Do I believe this is possible for me? Belief is the unseen engine behind everything you do. It is the invisible ceiling that either limits your potential or launches it into momentum. And until you learn to build belief deliberately, ruthlessly, intelligently, with precision, you will unconsciously sabotage every effort to learn, grow, and evolve. You can have access to the best mentors, the best systems, the best books and tools in the world, but if you don't believe in your capacity to improve, nothing changes. Because belief is not just a feeling. It is a command center. It dictates what you try, how deeply you try, and whether or not you'll try again when you fail. Most people don't lack intelligence, they lack belief. And that lack is subtle. It doesn't always announce itself as hopelessness. Sometimes it disguises itself as procrastination, perfectionism, hesitation, or chronic indecision. You say you'll start reading next week. You tell yourself you need to feel more motivated. You spend more time researching the perfect course than actually learning anything. Those are not logistical issues. They are belief issues. You're not convinced it will matter. You're not fully bought into the idea that a more educated, more skilled, more dangerous version of you is even real. So you delay. You stall. You rationalize. And all the while, your future slips further out of reach. To believe in yourself is not arrogance. It is responsibility. It is the recognition that your potential is too important to be left to doubt. It is understanding that belief must be cultivated, upgraded, and protected like a valuable asset, because that's what it is. Think of every person who changed their life through education and personal growth. They all started with belief, often fragile, sometimes irrational, but just strong enough to spark action. Carnegie believed in his mind before he ever owned steel. Franklin believed in progress before there was electricity. Oprah believed in her voice when the world told her to stay silent. Jobs believed in design and innovation long before the market understood why that mattered. Belief always comes first. It has to. You build belief through evidence. And evidence comes from action. That means you have to move before you feel confident. You have to act before the world validates your direction. You don't wait for belief to arrive. You create it. Every time you follow through, even in a small way, you're collecting proof that you are capable. Every finished book, every concept understood, every uncomfortable idea faced, every day you follow through when no one's watching. These are deposits in the bank of belief. And over time, that account grows. Not all at once, but incrementally, quietly. Until one day you wake up and realize, this isn't just possible, it's inevitable. But there's another side to belief that people ignore, what you believe about learning itself. If you believe learning is slow, painful, or reserved for a certain type of person, you will unconsciously avoid it. But if you believe that intelligence is flexible, that the brain is plastic, that you can build clarity and competence through exposure and effort, then learning becomes a challenge, not a threat. The science backs this. Neural pathways grow through repetition. Understanding deepens with tension, not comfort. Your brain was designed to change, but it only does so under pressure, under effort, under stress. So the question isn't, am I smart enough? It's, am I willing to believe that learning is mine to master? And let's not confuse belief with fantasy. This isn't about dreaming big and doing nothing. Belief without effort is delusion. But belief paired with disciplined, relentless self-education, that's transformation. That's when you stop reacting to life and start building it. That's when you go from being a follower to a force. Because belief gives you permission to persist. And in this world, most people don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because they never gave themselves permission to succeed. They waited for someone else to validate them, to say, you're ready. But the truth is no one ever comes. No one is going to crown you. No one is going to announce your worth. You have to believe before it's obvious. Before there's proof. Before there's praise. And once belief becomes strong, it changes how you use your time. You no longer consume information out of desperation, but out of purpose. You no longer study just to feel productive, but because every piece of insight becomes a weapon in the arsenal of your future. You don't need hype anymore. You have clarity. You have identity. You have belief. So how do you protect belief in a world built to undermine it? You filter what comes into your mind. You choose your environment with precision. You stop surrounding yourself with people who constantly complain, who scoff at ambition, who project their own limitations onto your potential. You stop allowing failure to be a referendum on your identity. You build a mental firewall and say, "This belief is mine. It's earned. It's built. And I will not trade it for temporary comfort or the approval of the average." And remember this, belief is not static. It either grows or decays. Every day you educate yourself, it grows. Every day you avoid your growth, it withers. You are responsible for that direction. You don't have to believe perfectly. You just have to believe enough to start. And if you do that, if you choose belief, reinforce it with action, and protect it with discipline, you'll be amazed at how quickly your mind evolves, your life transforms, and your future accelerates past the people who once seemed miles ahead. Educate yourself. Every day. Not just with content, but with the conviction that you are worth the effort. Because when belief becomes your baseline, education becomes your weapon, and progress becomes inevitable. Chapter 4, Clarity, the lens that sharpens every step. There's a reason most people wander through life without direction. It's not because they're lazy. It's not because they lack ambition. It's because they lack clarity. They haven't stopped long enough to ask the questions that matter. They haven't been taught how to think clearly, how to see themselves without distortion, how to separate noise from signal. And so, they drift. They move, but they don't progress. They chase what's popular, not what's purposeful. They respond to life instead of designing it. And the cost of that fog is enormous. Years lost, potential buried, a life that feels busy but hollow. Clarity is not a luxury. It is the requirement for meaningful learning, growth, and execution. You cannot educate yourself deeply if you don't know what you're aiming for. You cannot study effectively if you haven't identified what's essential. You cannot grow intentionally if you're unclear on who you want to become. In a world flooded with information, clarity is the competitive advantage. It's the filtering mechanism that allows you to say, "This matters. That doesn't. I'll go deep here and ignore the rest." Without it, you drown in distraction. With it, you cut through chaos like a blade. The first step to clarity is honesty. Brutal, surgical honesty. You must be willing to ask the questions most people avoid because they're uncomfortable. Who am I right now, really? Not how I present myself, not who people think I am, but who I am when no one's watching. What do I actually want? Not what I've been told to want, not what looks good on a resume or sounds impressive on social media, but what I want when I strip everything else away. What's not working? What habits, relationships, environments are silently draining me? What's the price of staying the same? And am I really willing to pay it for another year, another decade? These questions are not easy. That's why most people never ask them. But if you want to stay ahead, if you want to rise into the rare air where discipline meets mastery, you must stop running from reflection. You must sit in the silence long enough to hear the truth under the noise. Because clarity is not found in more data. It's found in discernment. In learning to focus your attention with precision. In cutting away everything that's not aligned with the future you're committed to building. Once you have that clarity, every decision becomes easier. Not effortless, but simpler. Because you're no longer choosing based on emotion, impulse, or fear of missing out. You're choosing based on alignment. Does this help me grow? Does this sharpen my mind? Does this serve the mission? If not, it doesn't belong. And you let it go, not with guilt, but with conviction. Because when you have clarity, you no longer apologize for being focused. You no longer dilute your potential to make others feel comfortable. You move with certainty, not because you have all the answers, but because you know the direction. Look at the lives of the most successful builders, thinkers, creators in history, and you'll see a pattern: clarity of intent. Henry Ford had one focus: make the automobile affordable for the common man. Everything he built was in service of that singular vision. Nikola Tesla was obsessed with energy, motion, and the advancement of civilization through innovation. He didn't care about money. He cared about progress. His clarity bordered on madness, but it's why his work still echoes across time. When you study these people, you see that their clarity gave them resilience, consistency, and impact. And it can do the same for you, but only if you're willing to define your target with precision and protect it with discipline. This is why educating yourself without clarity is dangerous, because it gives the illusion of growth while keeping you spinning in circles. You consume more, but retain less. You study more, but build nothing. You chase trends instead of timeless truths. Learning without direction becomes mental clutter. It feels productive, but it's not strategic. True education, the kind that transforms your life, is always rooted in clarity. You know what you're looking for. You know why it matters. And that purpose sharpens your mind into a weapon instead of a sponge. Clarity also gives you endurance. When you're clear on your path, you can push through when it gets hard. You stop needing hype. You stop needing constant motivation. Because your vision pulls you. It drags you forward through fatigue, through failure, through frustration. It silences the voice that says, maybe I should quit. Because you already decided, this is the path. This is the work. This is who I am becoming, no matter how long it takes. But clarity isn't a one-time revelation. It's a practice. You have to revisit it, refine it, reflect on it. Because as you grow, your clarity must evolve. The vision you had 5 years ago may no longer fit who you're becoming. And that's not failure, that's progress. But you have to check in. You have to ask, is this still true? Is this still the path? Do I need to aim higher, dig deeper, move differently? And if the answer is yes, you adjust. Not because you're lost, but because you've matured. Clarity is not rigid. It's dynamic, but it's always intentional. And when you live with that kind of intent, you become rare. You become someone who moves differently, who learns faster, who wastes less time, who builds with purpose. While the rest of the world floats, you forge. While they scroll, you study. While they chase everything, you master something. And over time, the gap becomes irreversible, not because you had more talent, but because you had more clarity. So if you want to stay ahead, if you want to make your learning stick, your time matter, your life count, start with clarity. Define who you are. Define where you're going. Define what matters. Then act like it. Every day. Not perfectly. Not without setbacks. But with the kind of focus that cuts through the noise and builds something real. Chapter 5. Vision, seeing the invisible before it becomes inevitable. Before anything is built, it must first be seen. Not with the eyes, but with the mind. Vision is not about what exists. Vision is about what could exist if you're willing to pay the price to create it. Every bridge, every law, every skyscraper, every company, every revolution, each began in the same place, the unseen space between imagination and reality, shaped and molded in the fire of someone's inner clarity. And those who achieve what seems impossible to others aren't necessarily smarter or more gifted. They simply had a vision, and they refused to let go of it. Vision is the architecture of the future. It is the blueprint for all meaningful learning, discipline, and achievement. Without vision, effort has no aim. Without vision, motivation fades fast. Without vision, you can be busy for years and never build anything worthwhile. That's why the difference between a wandering life and a meaningful one always starts with vision. Because vision gives everything else context. It gives your late nights and early mornings a reason. It gives your hunger for knowledge a target. It turns pain into preparation, obstacles into refinement, and time into a tool instead of a trap. But vision is not fantasy. It's not daydreaming or wishful thinking. Real vision is rooted in responsibility. It demands that you see yourself as a builder of the future, not a bystander to the present. It requires that you stop asking what the world will give you, and start asking what you were designed to bring to the world. It forces you to stop living reactively and start living architecturally. That means designing not just your schedule or your goals, but your entire philosophy of life. Who do I want to become? What legacy do I want to leave? What do I want to master so deeply that it creates undeniable value in the world? These are not soft questions. These are the hard questions, the ones that separate the 1% from the rest. When Walt Disney walked through an empty field of swampland in Florida, others saw mud and mosquitoes. He saw castles, kingdoms, families smiling, entire generations making memories in a place that didn't yet exist. That vision wasn't logical. It wasn't safe. But it was clear. And he spent his life building it. When Martin Luther King Jr. stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, he didn't describe what was, he described what could be. He painted a vision of a world not yet realized, where character would matter more than skin, where justice would flow like a river. That vision cost him everything. But it also inspired millions to rise, to act, to think differently. Visionaries are not just dreamers. They are disciples of the future. They serve it through education, discipline, and relentless focus. They understand that everything worthwhile starts with the courage to imagine a better outcome and the willingness to build it while being misunderstood. Vision is lonely at first because it separates you from the crowd. It makes you appear irrational, intense, even obsessed. But obsession is what greatness feels like to people addicted to mediocrity. You weren't meant to fit in. You were meant to forge forward. But you cannot do that unless your vision is sharper than your fear. And that vision must not be abstract. It must be translated into specifics. What skills will I need to bring this vision to life? What knowledge gaps do I have to close? What daily habits will support this outcome? You must reverse engineer the life you want with ruthless honesty. It's not enough to want freedom or impact or mastery. You must break those goals down into concrete steps and then ask, am I learning what I need to learn to get there? Am I exposing myself to the right material, the right mentors, the right environments to stretch my mind toward this target? Because vision without a plan is fantasy. And education without direction is a waste of energy. And as your vision grows, so must your tolerance for doubt, both internal and external. The higher you aim, the more resistance you will face. People will mock what they don't understand. They'll project their fears onto your ambition. And your own mind will try to sabotage you with whispers of, who do you think you are? This is where most people quit. Not because their vision wasn't possible, but because their belief cracked under the weight of other people's limitations. You must develop the mental resilience to hold the vision even when no one claps, even when nothing works, even when it looks like progress has abandoned you. Vision also creates urgency. When you're truly committed to a future that is bigger than your current life, time starts to look different. You stop tolerating distractions. You stop giving your energy to things that don't matter. You stop procrastinating because you realize every day wasted is a betrayal of the future you say you want. That urgency doesn't create anxiety, it creates clarity. It forces you to live with intent, to move with strategy, to study with intensity. The clearer the vision, the faster the execution. And don't be fooled into thinking your vision has to be massive to be meaningful. Your vision might be to become the most educated person in your family, to raise children who think independently, to start a school, to write a book that changes someone's life, to build a company that makes something better, faster, more accessible. Vision is not about ego. It's about impact. Whether that impact touches one life or millions, what matters is that you are living in alignment with a future you've chosen, not one you've defaulted into. One of the greatest tragedies of modern life is how many people are working hard toward goals they never chose. They're climbing ladders that are leaning against the wrong walls. They're investing years into careers, habits, and relationships that don't reflect their deepest values, because they never took the time to define what they're actually trying to build. Don't make that mistake. Don't spend decades on autopilot. Don't confuse activity with progress. So, define the vision. Make it clear. Make it loud. Make it yours. Once you do that, education stops being a chore and becomes a weapon. You begin to seek out knowledge not because it's interesting, but because it's necessary. You start reading not for entertainment, but for empowerment. You study with urgency because you know the clock is ticking, and every day you delay, someone else is building. And every day you show up to learn, you're closing the gap between who you are and who you were always meant to become. That's vision. It's not soft. It's not vague. It's not romantic. It's fire. It's fuel. It's the force that turns discipline into devotion and knowledge into strategy. It is the root of greatness, the compass of the elite, the beginning of everything that matters. Chapter 6. Purpose, the reason you endure, the reason you excel. Purpose is not a motivational word. It's not something you slap onto a vision board or print on a coffee mug. Purpose is a gravitational force. A non-negotiable. A fire that doesn't go out just because you're tired. Purpose is the difference between those who rise once and those who rise forever. Between those who can perform only when conditions are perfect, and those who execute in the chaos, in the pain, in the silence, because what drives them isn't applause, comfort, or convenience. It's something deeper, something earned, something sacred. When you educate yourself every day, you're not just collecting information. You're arming yourself for something bigger. You're preparing for the weight of a life lived on purpose. Because real purpose requires more than talent or passion. It requires preparation. It requires that you become someone worthy of the responsibility your purpose demands. You cannot carry a powerful mission with a weak spine. You cannot uplift others when you haven't mastered your own direction. And you cannot build something meaningful when you're scattered, uncertain, or mentally soft. Purpose gives your learning a target. It transforms reading into readiness. It gives repetition meaning. And it turns ordinary habits into sacred rituals. But to find purpose, you must first be willing to look in the mirror and admit that for most of your life, you've probably been running on autopilot. Doing what you were told. Chasing what was in front of you. Trying to keep up, rather than slow down and ask the most important question of all. What is this all for? Not in a philosophical sense. Not a vague, shallow idea of doing good or making money. What specifically do you want to build, to contribute, to solve, to transform? What injustice breaks your heart? What vision haunts your mind? What problems won't leave you alone because deep down, you know you were put here to do something about them? Purpose is born in those questions. Not in comfort, but in agitation. In discomfort. In that quiet knowing that you are living beneath your potential, that your work doesn't match your calling, that your days don't reflect your values. You can fake motivation. You can fake discipline for a while. But you cannot fake purpose. And until you find it, every step forward will feel forced. You'll consume information, but it won't transform you. You'll study strategies, but you won't stick with any of them. Because when purpose is missing, your mind will always find a way to talk you out of doing the hard thing. Only purpose can cut through that noise. Only purpose can turn resistance into fuel. And once you find it, once it clicks, you can never unsee it. Everything shifts. You no longer wake up to an alarm. You wake up to a mission. You no longer study because you should. You study because not learning would be a betrayal of the people who are depending on you, even if they don't know your name yet. You no longer need external validation to keep going. Because purpose rewires the brain. It shifts your identity. It creates internal accountability. You stop asking for permission. You stop waiting for the world to agree. You realize that nobody is coming to save you. Nobody is going to hand you clarity or motivation. And so you save yourself. You educate yourself. You prepare yourself, because someone has to. You have to understand, purpose is not always about changing the entire world. Sometimes it's about changing your corner of it. It's about being the person your younger self needed. It's about ending cycles in your family. It's about speaking truth in a culture of silence. It's about building something that outlives you. You don't need millions of followers to live with purpose. You need conviction. You need to stop wasting time chasing lives that aren't yours and start investing everything into becoming the person who can lead the life you were meant to live. And don't expect your purpose to be obvious at first. It won't arrive as a fully formed sentence. It will come in fragments, hunches, irritations, repeated thoughts you can't shake, things that make you feel alive and things that make you feel angry. Pay attention to those things. Purpose often speaks intention. You may not know where it's leading, but you know what it's calling you away from: comfort, distraction, mediocrity. The moment you feel that pull, you must begin. Not when it's convenient. Not when it makes sense to others. Because purpose has an expiration date. If you ignore it long enough, you start to numb. And once you're numb, you stop learning. You stop growing. You stop caring. The greatest danger isn't failure. It's detachment. Losing the connection to the why behind your actions. That's when you start drifting. That's when your habits decay and your standards soften. But if you anchor yourself to purpose, you develop emotional durability. You endure rejection, failure, boredom, fatigue, not because you enjoy it, but because what you're building is bigger than how you feel today. That's the kind of purpose that makes you unbeatable. It doesn't make the process easier. It makes the struggle worth it. And once you operate from purpose, your education strategy changes. You stop consuming for entertainment and start learning for leverage. You seek out the books that sharpen your worldview, the ideas that stretch your mental models, the truths that disrupt your comfort. You take notes with urgency. You study with reverence. Because you're not doing it to be smart, you're doing it to be ready. To lead. To teach. To build. You educate yourself because you are training for something too important to leave to chance. Purpose also creates focus. When your mind is pulled in 100 directions, that's not a discipline problem. It's a purpose problem. When your time keeps getting hijacked by meaningless things, it's because you haven't fully decided what matters most. Purpose brings everything into alignment. It simplifies. It purifies. It silences the noise and amplifies the signal. When your purpose is clear, decisions make themselves. Should I go to that party? Should I watch another episode? Should I read tonight? The answer isn't based on impulse, it's based on who I am becoming. That's the filter. That's the power of knowing why you're here. And here's the brutal truth: not everyone will understand. When you start living with purpose, some people will feel threatened. Some will think you've changed. Some will say you've become obsessed. And they're right. You have changed. You are obsessed. Because when you find something worth building, something worth suffering for, you don't water it down to make others feel safe. You rise. You learn. You lead. And in doing so, you give others permission to do the same. Not by preaching, but by becoming. So stop waiting to feel ready. Stop asking for a sign. Stop telling yourself that you need more time. The time is now. The sign is your dissatisfaction. The readiness will come through the work. Define your purpose. Align your habits. Educate yourself daily to become the person who can carry the weight of that purpose with clarity, strength, and relentless focus. Chapter 7. Discipline, Building the Life You Said You Wanted. Discipline is the bridge between who you are and who you told yourself you would become. It is not a matter of personality, luck, or natural willpower. Discipline is a decision made over and over again, usually in silence, often without praise, and always against resistance. It's easy to talk about what you want. It's easy to dream, to plan, to create a perfect schedule in your head. But the distance between that imagined life and the one you wake up to each day is carved by what you do when it's no longer exciting. What you do when you're tired, bored, misunderstood, or alone. That's where discipline lives. And that's where most people walk away. In the beginning, learning feels good. Growth feels intoxicating. Reading the first few pages of a new book, joining the course, writing down goals, that rush can trick you into believing you've already changed. But the truth is, nothing changes until you act consistently. Not occasionally. Not when you feel like it. But daily, especially when you don't. Discipline is not about intensity, it's about duration. Anybody can sprint for a few weeks. But the rare few who educate themselves every day for years, who master the craft in solitude, who make reflection, training, and self-study a non-negotiable part of life, those people leave everyone else behind. Not because they're better, but because they built longer. This is the part no one glamorizes. The hours in the morning when no one's awake and you're reading, practicing, refining. The time you walk away from meaningless distractions while everyone else is tuned in. The time you choose to review your notes, rewatch a lecture, or rewrite your ideas instead of zoning out like everyone else. Discipline is not sexy. It's not loud. It's not posted on Instagram. It's routine, quiet, ruthless. And if you learn to love that rhythm, if you can fall in love with the repetition and not just the reward, you become unshakable. Look at anyone who has achieved mastery in anything. Scientists, athletes, artists, builders. Their success wasn't magic. It wasn't fate. It was structure. It was repetition. It was doing the same fundamental things over and over again, long after it stopped being fun. Kobe Bryant shot thousands of free throws before sunrise. Not for show. For precision. Da Vinci didn't just draw masterpieces, he studied anatomy obsessively, sketching the same muscles, veins, and proportions from every angle for years. It's the unseen practice, the repeated discipline, that makes the visible excellence possible. If you want to educate yourself in a way that moves the needle, you need structure. You need time blocks, routines, systems that protect your focus. You can't rely on feeling inspired. You have to organize your day so that even your lowest moments still result in forward movement. Discipline is about making success inevitable. Not because you're superhuman, but because you've removed your emotions from the equation. You don't ask, "Do I feel like studying today?" You already decided yesterday that you would. And you execute that decision no matter how you feel. That's real power, not waiting to feel ready, but moving anyway. But let's be clear, discipline is not perfection. It's not about robotic execution. It's about recovery. It's about what you do after you miss a day. After you break a promise to yourself. After you slip. The average person justifies it, stays down, hits pause for a week, a month, a year. The disciplined person recalibrates immediately. They don't spiral. They don't wallow. They reset. That's the difference. It's not about never breaking. It's about refusing to let one break turn into a collapse. And the beautiful thing is, discipline is contagious. The more you keep your word to yourself, the more your mind starts to believe you. Your confidence grows, not because someone praised you, but because you've stacked evidence that you can be trusted with responsibility. You become your own leader, your own motivator. And that internal momentum spills over into every area of life. Your relationships improve because you're more present. Your work improves because you're sharper. Your decisions improve because you've trained yourself to delay gratification and play the long game. But the inverse is also true. Every time you break a promise to yourself, even a small one, you teach your mind that your words are cheap. You train yourself to settle, to tolerate excuses. And over time, that erosion of self-trust shows up everywhere. Low energy, confusion, anxiety, guilt. You start living in the mental fog of unfulfilled potential. And the longer you stay there, the harder it becomes to believe in your own ability to change. This is why discipline is a daily war. Not with the world, but with yourself. Every day, your mind will offer you a way out. A shortcut. A distraction. A good enough excuse to take it easy. And every day you have to choose, comfort or commitment. Most people never make it past the first battle. They lose the war before it starts, not because they're incapable, but because they never prepared for how loud the voice of resistance can be. But if you expect the voice, if you train for it, you can silence it, not with willpower, but with systems. You don't fight chaos with emotion. You fight it with order. You don't need to change your whole life overnight. You don't need to become perfect. You need to show up today and do what you said you would do. You need to pick up the book. Take the notes. Review the ideas. Block out 30 minutes for deep, focused, undistracted thinking. That's it. And then you repeat. And repeat again. And you do it so consistently that one day, without fanfare, you wake up and realize that you've separated yourself from everyone around you, not with luck or hype, but with habits that no one was willing to sustain. So if you want to stay ahead of 99% of people, if you want to build a mind that is sharp, capable, dangerous in the best way, then let go of the illusion that success is about intensity. It's about consistency. It's not about inspiration. It's about commitment. It's not about being motivated. It's about being loyal to the future you promised yourself. Discipline is the foundation. Education is the tool. Master them both, and there is no system, no challenge, no competitor that can outlast you. Chapter 8, Action, where knowledge meets power. The gap between knowing and doing is the graveyard where most potential dies. This is where the majority of the population gets stuck, trapped in an endless loop of acquiring information but never applying it. They read the books, take the courses, watch the videos, even talk about the insights, but when it comes time to move, to risk, to act, they freeze. They intellectualize their life but never materialize it. Action is where all that learning becomes real. Action is what separates the spectators from the builders, the thinkers from the creators, the consumers from the competitors. You can have the best strategy, the clearest vision, and a calendar full of scheduled habits. But if you don't act, none of it matters. The world doesn't reward ideas. It rewards execution. And execution begins the moment you stop overanalyzing and start moving. Messy, imperfect, uncertain, but forward. The highest levels of mastery are not reserved for the most educated in theory, but for the most disciplined in doing. The ability to turn thought into movement, to translate mental models into real-world results, is the single most valuable skill in any domain, any era. The modern world is full of people addicted to information but allergic to action. They read 5 productivity books and still hit snooze. They study entrepreneurship but never launch. They listen to endless hours of motivational content and yet stay paralyzed by fear, by perfectionism, by the illusion of readiness. But here's the truth, you will never feel fully ready. Readiness is a byproduct of momentum. Clarity emerges after you begin. Confidence is built through exposure, not comfort. And direction reveals itself through friction, through feedback, through trial. If you wait to feel like moving, you'll wait forever. Action isn't the result of motivation. It's the cause of it. You must train yourself to be biased toward action. Every single day, you should ask yourself, what am I doing with what I've learned? What insight am I applying? What am I building, testing, fixing, risking? Because knowledge without implementation is mental clutter. And inaction creates the illusion of growth while your reality stays exactly the same. The best way to learn is not to consume more. It's to act more. You will learn more in one day of applied failure than in a month of passive learning. Action accelerates comprehension because it forces clarity. When you take real steps, you're forced to face the details. The theory is easy in isolation. Application exposes the nuance. And that exposure is what transforms you. The most powerful minds in history were not content with understanding. They were obsessed with testing, refining, applying. Thomas Edison didn't theorize the light bulb into existence. He ran thousands of experiments until one worked. Leonardo da Vinci didn't just study anatomy. He dissected bodies with his own hands and sketched every detail. Elon Musk didn't stop at physics textbooks. He built rockets. Over and over. Learning and launching in tandem. That is what relentless action looks like. Not waiting for permission, not seeking perfection, but learning through direct confrontation with reality. This is where real leaders emerge. Anyone can have opinions. Anyone can say, I would do this if, or, I know how it should be done. But the real question is, what are you actually doing? Because you cannot lead others until you've led yourself through the resistance of your own hesitation. You cannot change systems, industries, or lives if you're stuck behind the wall of potential energy. The only way to break through is to move. And movement, action, will always be the most honest metric of progress. You also have to recognize that action comes with cost. You will fail. You will be misunderstood. You will lose things. Comfort. Maybe even people. That's the tax of execution. But here's what you gain: momentum, data, clarity, and most of all, identity. Because action shapes who you become. You become a builder when you build. You become disciplined when you show up consistently. You become confident when you do hard things and don't break. You cannot think your way into being a leader. You must act like one first and let the belief catch up. You need to move quickly, but not recklessly. Action does not mean chaos. It means intentional motion. It means moving with awareness. It means tracking what works, what doesn't, what needs refinement. You must close the loop between input and output. Don't just consume, create. Don't just absorb, apply. This loop of learn, act, reflect, adjust is what makes growth exponential. It creates a learning flywheel. One step creates a new question. That question leads to a deeper insight. That insight leads to a sharper action. And the cycle continues, each time faster, tighter, more effective. This is the foundation of building anything, the courage to start and the resilience to continue. Stop waiting for ideal circumstances. They don't exist. Stop trying to eliminate all risk. You can't. Stop rehearsing life in your head. The stage is already open. The lights are on. The audience is your future self, watching, waiting, wondering, will you finally act? And don't confuse being busy with taking action. Busyness is often the disguise of fear. Action has a direction. It has stakes. It produces real, trackable change. It creates tension. If your actions aren't pushing you outside your comfort zone, they're not actions. They're distractions. Real action should feel like a commitment, not a performance. If you're not nervous, you're not moving far enough. If you're not failing, you're not stretching. And if you're not stretching, you're not growing. So what do you do with this? You take one piece of what you've learned, and you act on it today. Not tomorrow. Not next Monday. Today. Write the first page. Make the first call. Build the first draft. Launch the test. Start the practice. Revisit the plan. Apply the principle. And then repeat. Again. And again. And again. Because action compounds. It's not the grand gesture. It's the daily execution that separates the few who lead from the many who linger. Every single day you educate yourself but fail to act is a day that confirms you're still waiting. But every day you combine learning with motion, even messy, uncertain, unglamorous motion, you widen the gap between you and everyone else standing still. This is how you rise. Not with declarations. Not with perfect plans. But with one bold, disciplined, imperfect action at a time. Chapter 9. Adaptability, Intelligence in Motion. The most dangerous belief you can hold in a fast-moving world is that what made you successful yesterday will keep you successful tomorrow. The world doesn't care about your comfort. It doesn't care about your past wins, your well-crafted plans, or how long you've been doing something the same way. The only constant is change. And those who rise, those who lead, dominate, and endure, are not the ones with the most resources, talent, or connections. They are the ones who can adapt faster than the world around them. Adaptability is not just a soft skill. It is survival. It is leverage. It is the superpower of those who outlearn and outlast. To educate yourself every day without learning how to adapt is like pouring water into a cracked container. It leaks. It goes nowhere. Adaptability is the container. It's the framework that allows everything else, your mindset, your vision, your discipline, your actions, to remain useful in the face of uncertainty. Without adaptability, knowledge becomes outdated. Skills become irrelevant. Goals become misaligned. And worst of all, you become resistant to reality. Adaptability isn't about changing who you are. It's about updating how you operate in response to new information. That's the key difference. Weak minds see change as a threat to identity. Strong minds see change as a signal to evolve. They don't resist it. They study it. They learn the new language, embrace the new tools, explore the new terrain. And they do it not because it's comfortable, but because stagnation terrifies them more than discomfort ever could. If you study history, the ones who lost their grip on relevance were rarely defeated by external forces. They were defeated by inflexibility. Kodak invented the digital camera and buried it because they were afraid to cannibalize their own film business. Blockbuster had the chance to buy Netflix and laughed it off because they were loyal to a business model instead of the market. General Motors went bankrupt, not because Americans stopped buying cars, but because they ignored the obvious shift in energy and design preferences. These weren't failures of intelligence. They were failures of adaptation. Pride in the past blinded them to the signals of the future. Adaptability begins with awareness. You have to be honest enough to admit when something isn't working. Whether it's a habit, a strategy, a belief, or a learning method, you must detach your identity from your systems. Just because it worked before doesn't mean it still serves you now. Just because it's comfortable doesn't mean it's useful. This is where most people get stuck. They fall in love with their process instead of the purpose. They stay loyal to methods that no longer match their mission. And when the world shifts, they cling harder instead of pivoting faster. The adaptable don't waste time mourning what no longer fits. They recalibrate quickly. They ask better questions. What's changed? What do I need to learn to stay sharp? What assumptions no longer hold? What skills do I need to drop, upgrade, or replace? They don't panic. They prepare. And that preparation starts with a mindset that's fluid, not rigid. That's open, not defensive. That can hold two conflicting ideas at once without shutting down. That doesn't fear being wrong, because being wrong is just the prelude to being more effective. You must build systems in your life that make adaptation easier. That means constantly testing new ways of learning, new tools for managing your time, new frameworks for solving problems. It means learning across disciplines, not just deep in one. Because innovation happens at the intersection of ideas. It happens when someone trained in one field sees a breakthrough in another and connects the dots that no one else noticed. The generalist who can adapt to multiple environments will always outperform the specialist who refuses to leave his lane. And let's talk about emotional adaptability, because it's just as critical. Life will not protect your feelings. You will be rejected. Plans will collapse. People will disappoint you. And when that happens, your ability to emotionally regulate in the face of chaos will determine how fast you bounce back. The immature reaction is to blame, withdraw, deny. The adaptable reaction is to observe, absorb, and adjust. It doesn't mean you ignore pain. It means you use pain. You extract the lesson. You redirect the energy. And you move. Because staying stuck in a story that no longer serves you is a choice. A dangerous one. Adaptability also requires the humility to remain a student, always. No matter how experienced, how successful, how recognized you become. The moment you think you've figured it all out is the moment you begin to decay. The moment your ego convinces you that there's nothing new to learn is the moment you start falling behind, whether you see it or not. True power comes from humble reinvention. From the constant willingness to unlearn, relearn, and evolve. You have to train yourself to expect change, not fear it. To move toward uncertainty, not away from it. That means deliberately putting yourself in situations that stretch you, new projects, new people, new problems. It means getting comfortable being the least informed person in the room sometimes. Because that's where the growth lives. You'll never become extraordinary inside the boundaries of what you already know. Adaptability demands that you trade the illusion of competence for the reality of expansion. And let me be clear, adaptability is not about losing your backbone. It's not about being vague, indecisive, or constantly changing direction. It's about knowing exactly who you are and what you want, and being willing to adjust the how when the world shifts beneath your feet. It's about holding the mission steady while changing the method. The people who do this well, who keep their vision anchored while allowing their process to evolve, these are the people who build things that last. They become timeless, not because they never change, but because they never stop adjusting. So how does this connect to educating yourself every day? Simple. Your education is your response mechanism. It's how you stay ready. It's how you stay sharp. It's how you stay ahead. The more you know, the faster you can pivot. The deeper your knowledge base, the more creatively you can solve new problems. The broader your learning, the more options you have when one path closes. Education is not just preparation, it's adaptation insurance. It's how you future-proof your mind, your career, your decisions. We are entering a world where adaptability will outpace intelligence. Where the people who rise are not those with the most impressive resumes, but those with the fastest learning loops. Those who can absorb, adjust, apply, and move on, without getting stuck in emotion, ego, or entitlement. So start practicing now. Learn something new and test it. Try a different workflow. Ask new questions. Explore new fields. Get uncomfortable. Learn faster. Adjust quicker. And do it every single day. Because the pace of change is not slowing down. And the ones who will stay ahead, the true 1%, are not the ones who hold on tight. They are the ones who move with grace, with skill, and with relentless adaptability. Chapter 10. Resilience, how you learn to endure and outlast. No matter how much you learn, how sharp your vision becomes, how refined your strategies are, you will be tested. Not once. Not occasionally. Constantly. There will be days when the information isn't enough. When your plans collapse. When your confidence cracks. When you're met with silence, with rejection, with results that don't match your effort. It's in those moments, especially in those moments, that resilience reveals itself. Resilience is not toughness in theory. It is the daily act of staying in the fight when nothing makes sense, when everything hurts, and when no one is clapping. It's the unshakable force that keeps you standing after the storm, the failure, the setback. And if you're serious about staying ahead, about building a life that actually lasts, resilience is non-negotiable. People think resilience means bouncing back. But the truth is, it's not about coming back to where you were. It's about becoming someone stronger. Someone more grounded, more equipped, more dangerous in the best sense of the word. Resilience is growth under pressure. It's how you take the hit and turn it into horsepower. And no matter how much you study, there is no book, no lecture, no masterclass that can give it to you. You have to earn it. Through experience. Through struggle. Through choosing to rise again when your logic says quit. It begins with perspective. You have to stop seeing setbacks as interruptions and start seeing them as part of the path. You want to educate yourself every day? Then learn to study life, not just concepts and data. Learn to extract meaning from hardship. Learn to ask not, why is this happening to me? But, what is this trying to build in me? Because when you look at the world through that lens, even pain becomes purposeful. Even loss becomes fuel. And that is the mindset that makes you unstoppable, not because you don't fall, but because falling no longer breaks you. The people who accomplish extraordinary things are not those who had an easy road. They are the ones who took the hard road and kept going. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. He came out not bitter, but bigger. Abraham Lincoln lost elections, battled depression, buried children, and still led a divided nation through its darkest hour. J.K. Rowling was rejected dozens of times by publishers who told her no one would read her story. These people did not just push through, they used their hardship. They built from it. They refined themselves through it. That's resilience. And it's not reserved for the historical elite. It's built in quiet choices, every day, by anyone who refuses to stay down. You have to understand something. Resilience is trained, just like intelligence. It's not something you either have or don't. It's built through repetition. And most importantly, it's built in the small things. It's not just how you handle tragedy. It's how you handle a bad day. How you respond when you're tired. How you act when no one is watching. How you show up when your mind tells you it's pointless. Every time you choose consistency over comfort, you're strengthening the muscle. Every time you finish what you started, even when you're no longer inspired, you're building grit. And over time, those small wins create a level of emotional armor that nothing external can penetrate. Let's be clear, resilience doesn't mean pretending to be okay. It doesn't mean suppressing your emotions or hiding your struggle. It means being honest about where you are, but refusing to stay there. It means honoring your pain but not worshiping it. It means letting the weight shape you but not own you. And the most powerful form of resilience isn't brute force. It's mental flexibility. It's the ability to adjust without losing your core. To bend without breaking. To navigate pressure without losing your identity. And here's what most people miss. Resilience is not just about you. It's about the people who are watching you even when you don't realize it. Your children. Your friends. The stranger who saw you persevere and started to believe they could too. Your resilience creates a ripple. It gives others permission to keep going. To face their own struggle with more courage. To show up when it's hard. When you educate yourself, when you push through, when you rise again, you're not just building your future. You're showing others what's possible. That's legacy. That's leadership. Resilience also changes the way you learn. When you're resilient, you stop needing learning to be easy. You stop expecting immediate payoff. You understand that mastery comes through repetition, boredom, setbacks, and slow progress. That every great mind was forged not through constant wins, but through the decision to continue in the face of stagnation. The disciplined learner is not the one who always feels like studying. It's the one who keeps showing up because they know that real power is built through resistance. Resilience is the antidote to the modern attention span. It's how you endure in a world of dopamine loops, endless options, and instant gratification. It's how you develop deep focus while everyone else is bouncing between tabs. It's how you finish the book, complete the course, master the skill, launch the project, because you trained yourself to do hard things repeatedly regardless of how you feel. And yes, it's exhausting. That's the point. Anything worth building is supposed to take more out of you than you thought you had to give. But resilience doesn't just ask you to push through. Return something too. It gives you self-respect. It gives you dignity. It gives you the kind of earned pride that no external reward can ever replace. And when you've been through enough, when you've survived and rebuilt and endured, you carry that with you. You walk differently. You speak differently. Because you know, you've already been to the bottom and you didn't break. This is how you separate yourself. Not just with knowledge. Not just with skill. But with a spirit that refuses to quit. A mind that recalibrates instead of crumbling. A heart that beats louder after every hit. That's resilience. And when you combine it with daily self-education, when you marry effort with evolution, you become impossible to ignore, impossible to defeat, and impossible to replicate. Because anyone can look strong in a good season. But the 1%? They're forged in the storm. They are not just students of information, they are students of endurance. Chapter 11. Learning, the discipline of the obsessed. Learning is not a phase. It's not a project you finish. It's not something you graduate from. Learning, deep, obsessive, disciplined learning, is a lifestyle. It's not something you do when it's convenient or scheduled. It's not limited to schools, certifications, or workshops. Real learning is what happens when you understand that your ability to grow, adapt, lead, compete, and create value is directly tied to how fast you can evolve your understanding of the world. And that understanding must be deliberate, consistent, and unrelenting. We live in a time where most people are drowning in content but starving for comprehension. They consume endlessly, scrolling through bite-sized pieces of information that are shallow, disconnected, and quickly forgotten. But consumption is not learning. Consumption is easy. Learning requires engagement. It requires that you stop being a passive observer of knowledge and start wrestling with it, applying it, challenging it, making it yours. Until you do that, your knowledge is just trivia, intellectual entertainment with no real utility. Learning is not something you fit into the leftover corners of your day. It has to be designed into your life. That means building rituals around reflection, reading, listening, studying, writing, teaching. It means blocking time, not just for work, but for mental development. Not just to do, but to understand. Because if your knowledge stays abstract, disconnected from action, it will never integrate into who you are. You have to close the loop between theory and application. That's when learning transforms you. That's when it begins to compound. Let's be clear, most people stop learning around the age of 25. Not officially, but practically. They graduate, get a job, build a routine, and then stop evolving. They stay in the same mental operating system for decades. Same beliefs, same assumptions, same habits of thought. And they wonder why their life doesn't change. They confuse experience with wisdom. But repetition without reflection is not experience. It's stagnation. The only difference between a decade of growth and a decade of repetition is whether or not you were learning. The most dangerous person in any room is not the one with the most credentials. It's the one who never stops learning. Because that person can walk into any new space, ask the right questions, absorb the right information, connect ideas faster, and solve problems others don't even understand. They don't need to have all the answers. They just need to know how to find them. And more importantly, how to use them. That's the power of a learning lifestyle. It makes you adaptable, dangerous, and independent. So how do you learn like the 1%? First, you build a system. Haphazard learning leads to shallow understanding. You need a strategy. What do you want to master? What are the foundational concepts in that field? Who are the top thinkers? What books are essential? What skills will give you leverage? You must reverse engineer your learning journey like a military campaign. You attack it with intent. You map it. You track your progress. You don't just read randomly. You build knowledge like an architect builds a fortress, brick by brick, layer by layer, with no weak spots. Second, you become a master of note-taking and retention. Most people forget 90% of what they read because they don't engage with it. Don't just highlight. Summarize. Teach it to someone else. Turn it into a mental model. Put it into your own words. The brain doesn't retain what it doesn't rehearse. And rehearsal is not passive. It's active engagement. The more you wrestle with the idea, the more your brain builds neural networks around it. That's how mastery is built, not in exposure, but in depth. Third, you study across disciplines. Don't just go deep, go wide. Learn from philosophy, psychology, economics, biology, history, design, technology. Because breakthroughs happen at the intersection of ideas. You start to see patterns. You draw insights that others miss. You find parallels between seemingly unrelated fields, and those connections become your edge. Steve Jobs didn't innovate through coding alone. He studied calligraphy. Elon Musk didn't understand rockets because of a degree. He read physics textbooks and asked deep, hard questions across multiple fields. The best thinkers don't silo their knowledge. They integrate it. Fourth, you read every day. There is no replacement. Books are concentrated insight, decades of someone else's life, mistakes, brilliance, and reflection distilled into a few hours of focused thought. When you read, you collapse time. You inherit lessons you didn't have to pay for in blood or years. And you don't just read what you agree with. You read ideas that challenge you. You study your enemies. You understand opposing worldviews. Because if you don't understand other people's frameworks, you don't understand your own. And without that, your knowledge is fragile, easy to break, easy to replace. Fifth, and maybe most importantly, you teach. If you want to master something, teach it. Not formally, just speak it, write it, explain it. Teaching is the final layer of learning. It forces clarity. It reveals what you actually know versus what you've just memorized. When you can take a complex idea and make it simple enough for a child to understand, that's when you own it. That's when it becomes usable knowledge, not just mental clutter. And yes, this takes time. It takes energy. It takes humility. Because learning is not comfortable. You will confront your ignorance. You will feel stupid. You will question what you once believed. But that's the price. And it's worth it. Because the world is full of people who are informed, but few who are transformed. People who have access to data, but lack wisdom. People who can repeat information, but can't solve real problems. Learning, real learning, is how you become the exception. It's how you stay ahead while others plateau. Every day that you read, reflect, and apply, you are not just gaining knowledge. You are building identity. You are becoming the kind of person who is impossible to manipulate, impossible to replace, and impossible to ignore. You are sharpening your judgment, expanding your mind, and building a future-proof foundation. And when disruption comes, and it always comes, it's not the strongest who survive. It's not the richest. It's the ones who learned faster than everyone else. This is what the 99% don't understand. They think success is a lottery, or a gift, or a matter of luck. But the ones who win over and over again, the quiet dominators, the architects of industries, the invisible giants behind movements, they all have the same discipline. They learn every day, relentlessly, with no finish line, no ego, no excuses. Chapter 12. Mastery, the destination that has no end. This is where it all leads. Not to a certificate, not to a title, not even to applause, but to mastery, the silent, unshakable knowing that you have become someone others can count on, someone who moves with precision, someone who no longer chases potential but embodies it. Mastery isn't something you arrive at. It's not a box you check. It's a way of life. A lifelong relationship between your curiosity, your discipline, and your craft. Mastery is the ability to go beyond the surface, to see what others miss, to hear what others ignore, to understand not just the answer, but the layers beneath the question. It's what happens when repetition is married to deep reflection. When action becomes intuitive because you've spent so many hours immersed in your domain that it has become part of your nervous system. It's when your thoughts sharpen without effort. When you no longer need to get ready, because you are ready every day, in every room, in every season. But here's what most never realize. Mastery is not about being better than others. It's not about dominance for the sake of ego. It's about responsibility. The responsibility to serve, to build, to teach, to elevate everything you touch. True masters aren't loud. They don't beg for recognition. They don't compete with the mediocre. They compete with their own limits over and over, for decades. And they find joy not in being praised, but in knowing they didn't compromise on the process, on their standards, or on their identity. You don't stumble into mastery. You don't fake your way there. You don't get there by dabbling, or jumping from interest to interest, or quitting every time progress slows down. You get there through obsession. Through building every single day, even when no one is watching, even when your progress is invisible, even when it feels like nothing is moving. That's what separates the few from the rest. Not talent, not opportunity, but grit in the quiet years. Grit in the dark. Grit when the rewards are nowhere in sight, but your vision refuses to let you quit. The path to mastery is filled with resistance, plateaus that stretch for months, doubts that show up without warning, setbacks that make you question your worth. But masters aren't immune to those things. They've just learned to keep going anyway. They've trained themselves to stay focused when others fold, to remain curious when others grow cynical, to build with precision even when the world is distracted by speed and shortcuts. And here's the paradox. The deeper you go into learning, the more you realize how much you still don't know. Masters are not arrogant. They are humble because they've been humbled by complexity. They've seen how deep the rabbit hole goes. They know that beneath every solved problem lies another level of challenge, another layer of nuance, another puzzle waiting to be understood. This humility isn't weakness. It's power, because it keeps them open. Open to learning, open to feedback, open to the next level. Mastery demands you kill your ego daily. It demands that you care more about results than image. That you choose solitude over spotlight. That you do the unglamorous work long enough for it to become who you are. It means you've built a life around continuous refinement, not because you're chasing perfection, but because you've tasted excellence, and you refuse to settle for anything less. It also means you've accepted something most people run from. This will never be over. There is no final arrival. No point where you say, I've made it, I can stop. Masters don't stop. Because they don't learn just to win. They learn because they love to understand. They grow because growth is who they are. It's wired into them. The same way a river keeps flowing, the same way fire keeps burning, the master keeps learning. Forever. And it's not just about one field. Mastery in one area teaches you how to approach everything. It changes how you think, how you communicate, how you see the world. A master of code can become a masterful communicator. A master of art can develop masterful systems. A master of leadership can build empires that last centuries. The methods change, but the mindset, the standards, the work ethic, those stay the same. This is what you've been building every chapter. Not a hobby. Not a quick fix. Not a trend. A path. A system. A rhythm. A discipline of mastery. Educating yourself daily not just to get ahead, but to become someone no one can catch. Someone who doesn't just survive the future, but defines it. And the reward? It's not fame. Not applause. It's waking up and knowing that when life punches you, you won't fold. That when the world changes, you won't panic. That when someone needs answers, you'll have them. That when it's time to build, to lead, to carry the weight, you're not just ready, you were made for it. So now what? You continue. You continue learning. Continue building. Continue studying, asking, stretching, reaching. Not because you have to, but because this is who you are now. You are no longer someone who waits. You are someone who moves. You are no longer someone who drowns in information. You are someone who uses it. You are no longer someone who dreams in silence. You are someone who acts in precision. Because every day, while the majority settle into routine, you rise into refinement. While the crowd chases trends, you chase truth. While the world sleeps, you train. And while most talk, you build. That is the life of mastery. That is the life that stays ahead. Not for a month. Not for a year. Forever.